gives and Allah takes. I fear that I do not have much time left in this world, yet I cannot complain. My life has been an adventure, and for all my humility, I believe it has been extraordinary enough to be written about. You may accuse me of vanity, but I have decided to write the book myself. It should be good literature, after all. I dined with fine emirs and caroused with simple peasants on moonlit steppes. I waged wars and sat on thrones, only to lose them again. And it all began in the maelstrom of intrigue and bloody skirmishes that was my beloved Transoxiana, the melting pot of Persian high culture and nomadic traditions. To the east of Samarkand, my father ruled the fertile slopes of the Fergana Valley. Like all heirs of Tamerlane, he was a proud Timurid who sought to imitate his great ancestor. Unfortunately, Allah had not blessed him with a knack for warfare. After a few humiliating defeats, he decided to devote himself to his other passions: eating, drinking, and rearing pigeons. One day, as my father was climbing the stairs to check on his birds, Allah, in his infinite wisdom, decided that this model of gluttony had waffled on the earth for long enough. Halfway up to the dovecote, the stairs collapsed under him, and he fell to his death. And that is how I, Babur, came to be lord of the Fergana Valley. Yet, like all transitions of power in our culture, it was not to be a peaceful one. Thanks to my dear mother, Kutluk, my beys agreed not to abandon what surely appeared to be a dynasty in shambles. But my devious uncles were another matter. At that time, I was just a 14-year-old boy with nothing to my name, and my uncles, who had long desired the Fergana Valley, thought that my inheritance was ripe for the taking. On a moonless autumn night, we overcame the walls of Samarkand. The city's merchants and dignitaries were thrilled to receive me and praised my sense of justice, as they had heard that I did not tolerate looting among my soldiers. Yet when Shaybani Khan returned in the spring and Uzbek soldiers blocked the trade routes, their enthusiasm quickly evaporated. Before long, a famine broke out in the city. As the weeks wore on, more and more of my men left Samarkand under the pretext that they might catch a few sheep outside of the walls. None of them were ever seen again. In the end, I realized that I had to gamble for my survival. With my last loyal followers, I snuck past the besiegers during the night and sped towards the Fergana Valley to procure provisions and reinforcements. When we reached the valley at dawn, 2 riders came bringing terrible news. In my absence, one of Shaybani's generals had made himself the new master of Fergana. I felt like my father must have when the stairs gave way under him. I had stretched my luck too thin and lost the land of my forefathers to the invaders. So it was that I, the great Babur who so recently had sat upon Tamerlane's throne in Samarkand, was now grateful for every watery bowl of millet porridge that I could get my hands on. I was in a pitiful state. My so-called army consisted of 15 riders, only 3 of which had swords. Hungry and battered, we spent the nights in the wild, and my mother slept in our only remaining weatherproof tent. Oh, Kutluk, my dear mother. Without her, I would have been hopelessly lost. Brave and indomitable, more skilled with her bow than any of my soldiers. She was a Mongolian princess sprung from the old tales. I am not ashamed to admit that I often cried myself to sleep in her arms in those awful days. She would tell me the legends of Genghis Khan and Tamerlane, and the painful setbacks that they had to endure before their days of greatness finally came. just as they would for me. My mother turned out to be right. After 3 years of hardship, a messenger arrived from distant Herat. My uncle, Hussein Baikara, the last reigning Timurid, sought a capable commander to lead the city's defense against the Uzbeks, who were now hovering around Herat like vultures. It was an opportunity that I could not pass up. The Uzbeks had been driven out, or so I thought. As soon as I left Persia, Herat was overrun by a third Uzbek army, which had been waiting for me to lower my guard. Yet the pain of losing Herat was nothing compared to what befell me shortly after taking Kabul. My noble mother, who had suffered all of the hardships of the last few years without complaining, died in the shadow of the city's snow-capped mountains. It was not a good place for Kutluk to die. She had always loved the rolling hills of Samarkand. Yet, even as grief consumed me, I surrendered her body to the earth in the most beautiful terrace garden in all of Kabul. I had become the ruler of a grand cosmopolitan city. Yet I felt like the poorest man in the world. It seemed that for every good thing that I was given, something valuable was taken away from me. Allah gives, and Allah takes. Samarkand was the most beautiful face that the earth has ever turned towards the sun. And in Herat, you were sure to accidentally kick a poet whenever you stretched your legs. I missed both of these cities dearly, but my new capital was not too shabby either. With skies filled with herons and cranes, surrounded by breathtaking mountains and hills dressed in fruit orchards, Kabul was a jewel in the wilderness. This unending loveliness inspired me to beautify the city even more. New palaces were erected and mosques established. Trees were planted and gardens built, the most beautiful in the world, mind you. The money required for these lavish projects came easily, as Kabul lay at the heart of the Silk Road. And the trade caravans from northern India brought not only sweets and aromatic roots, but also interesting news. The Indian city-states beyond the mountains were still recovering from Tamerlane's invasion 100 years earlier. Apparently, they were weak enough to offer little resistance to a determined invader. I had to get to the bottom of these rumors, so I organized an expedition to Hindustan. And since you can always combine the useful with the pleasant, I decided to carry out the expedition as a raid. Coin, diamonds, and rubies that my men presented to me, these spoils were merely the promise of something far greater. But I had just the idea for how to invest these new riches. Far to the west, in the Ottoman Empire, great advances had been achieved in gunpowder technology. The Sultan had entire gunpowder regiments at his disposal, and his new cannons were suitable not only for sieges, but also for use in battle. Thus, I sent negotiators to the Ottomans to acquire these miracle weapons for me, and to hire experts to demonstrate their use to my men, who only knew how to fight with bows and sabers. The sound of a cannon being fired is indescribable. For a while, I forgot about all of my troubles and simply fired a cannonball each day for my own amusement. Hearing of my new toys, my relatives began pleading for me to retake Transoxiana from the Uzbeks, even awarding me the title Padshah, Great King. A decent ploy, but my attention was now fixed on India. Strictly speaking, India already belonged to me, as Tamerlane had once conquered it for our family. As the last ruling descendant of the great Amir, It was only right that I be given back what someone else was only administering for me. That someone was a man named Ibrahim Lodi, an Afghan pretender who ruled northern India from his capital in Delhi. Seeking to avoid unnecessary bloodshed, I wrote him a friendly letter and gave him a goshawk as a present. All that I asked in return was for my lands to be given back to me. Unfortunately, Ibrahim Lodi never replied, and so I had to put down the quill and let my cannons do the talking. With 15,000 men, I marched on Panipad, a small village on the plains northeast of Delhi. Ibrahim, for his part, mobilized an army of 100,000. In front of my men, I played the intrepid general, unshaken even by this unimaginable number. But secretly, I wondered if I had not bitten off more than I could chew. On the fields of Panipad, the enemy's strength in numbers proved to be its greatest weakness. Having never faced firearms before, Ibrahim's terrified war elephants were rendered useless by the thundering of my cannons. With little room to maneuver, his fighters huddled together so closely that they became nearly immobile. Firing straight into their lines, my cannoneers created a bloodbath. Just a few hours after the battle begun, there was nothing left of Ibrahim's army. My men found his body in a mountain of corpses and brought me his head as evidence of his demise. With Ibrahim's death, the Sultanate of Delhi came to an end. I had a tomb erected for the fallen Sultan in Panipad, as a reminder that the great Babur treats even his fiercest opponents with respect. Having established myself as the new ruler of northern India, I set out to explore my new realm. But wherever I went, I experienced only shock and disappointment. The people here lacked all good manners and never paid their taxes on time. None of the cities that I visited had a university, and there were no good horses to be found, no tasty grapes or sweet melons. Nothing. The one saving grace was the enormous deposits of gold and silver. Riches which made the Rajput empires in the west regard me with envy and suspicion. I knew better than to underestimate these independent princes, whom even Lodi had failed to subjugate. But motivating my men to do battle with them proved difficult. Many of the soldiers who had traveled with me from Kabul were disappointed that our campaign had not ended with a traditional Timurid pillaging. Like a sword that had seen too many battles, their loyalty had been blunted. I had to use all of my eloquence to convince them to stay. In a humbling act of sacrifice, symbolic of what I now asked of my followers, I publicly spilled a whole batch of Afghan wine that I had been looking forward to for months. My men were moved to tears when I announced that I would never again drink wine, for they knew very well how devoted I was to such worldly pleasures. When I asked Allah for his blessing, my soldiers held up their weapons in assent. With my warriors' loyalty sharpened, I began preparing for war. With the Rajput alliance crushed, there was no one left who dared challenge me. A grand feast was held to celebrate my victory. Everyone who had stood by my side on my arduous path to power received an invitation, as did, of course, all of the descendants of Genghis Khan and Tamerlane. 40,000 guests accepted the invitation, including princes from Persia, veterans from Kashmir, and even commoners who had done me a favor in one way or another. Yet what pleased me most was the arrival of about 100 Afghan peasants from Transoxiana who had given me shelter during my days in the wilderness. I had never forgotten the bravery of these common shepherds, and they, evidently, had not forgotten me either. while I laughed at the follies of my fellow commanders and danced to my heart's content with the cheerful peasants. It was all just for show. On the inside, I remain a stranger, alone in a foreign land.